Friends, family, we're gathered here today because our beloved hard support player has died. But this is no time for rest because there is still stuff to be doing when you die. Now, first, we should dispel this notion that a lot of people think it's okay for hard supports to just die because they're worthless. It's not true. Your life matters a lot, and if you ever feel like it doesn't, you should go out, talk to people, and get help that you need. It's not weakness to find help. That is 100% real talk. Now that my misdirection joke is done, let's get back to Dota because you can totally die in this game and it's whatever. You just respawn. Lol, it's a video game, guys. But you still shouldn't just try to die because that's not productive for your team. Really, we do need to dispel this notion of dying is just okay. Dying can be relatively okay. Dying itself is always a negative. You're dead. You lose gold for dying. You can't collect more golden experience. The reason that people say, "Oh, it's okay for that hard support to die," is because it should be a trade-off. Where, for example, if you're a carry or your hard support, one of them had to die, who should you pick? The hard support should die because the carry needs a lot of golden experience, and when they're dead, they're losing gold and they're losing the ability to go collect more. So the hard support, who doesn't need it as much, right? They would rather be the one who dies. Plus, they have a lower overall net worth, so they lose less for dying. They have not necessarily less impact for dying, but because they don't need to collect golden experience, it is more okay for them to die than for the carry. Now, what if the carry was going to get out, but then you just happen to die because you make a mistake? Then it's not okay, and I think that should be obvious, right? You're not trading your life to save your carry. Your carry was getting out anyways. So you shouldn't think, "Oh, it's okay that I died." It's not like game ending by any means, but you shouldn't be okay with just dying. You should really try to stay alive because you can just do more when you're alive. I mean, saying that, we're about to talk about what you can do when you're dead, but it's all stuff that really you would like to be doing at the same time you are alive, anyways. The other situation where it's okay to die is when you are making a lot of space for your team. So, for example, say your safe lane is really dangerous for your team to be in, and you are down there and you're constantly pushing out the waves, and that can be okay because every time you kill one creep wave, it's 30 seconds of space for your team, essentially. Where if the enemy team is trying to get the bottom tower, you kill one creep wave, like they have to be there for 30 more seconds for the next creep wave, and that's pretty good. But what it comes down to is how many of the enemy heroes are you preoccupying in that time. If it's just a one-on-one hero, it's kind of okay, especially if the enemy hero is like a core. Then, a hard support to take up the time of a core hero, that can be okay, but it's not the best because it's a one-on-one, and in the end, they are farming. But what if it's taking two enemy heroes, maybe three enemy heroes? Now it's getting really good because it's just you, the hard support, and they are dedicating three heroes to be in the same part of the map you are. And now if you die, it's not such a big deal because in that time, four other heroes on your team should have been moving around the map, and at most, two enemy heroes could have been around there. And especially if you're able to defend multiple waves, then it is okay to die down there. Now, having said that, let's move on from there. There are tons of situations you could go into of deciding was it worth dying or not. The general rule is try not to die. Like, it'd be great if you just don't die anytime in the game. But having said that, you shouldn't just watch your carries die and then be like, "Well, I didn't die, so it wasn't my fault." You need to recognize when it's like, "Oh, I could have saved that guy's life," but try to save their life without dying. And if you have to die, then you commit that. But if you don't, it's good. Another way to think about it is like Dazzle. Could you save your carry without using Grave? Then it's okay. But if you had to use Grave, then it's like, okay, I'll use Grave. Dying is like another thing you can do for your carry, where it's like, I would like to save them without dying, but you know what? If I have to body block them and die, I will pay the ultimate price for my carry. So with that, regardless of whether you died being worthwhile or not, there are still things you should do. So now let's get into that. I have this checklist here of things we can do when we are dead. They're not in necessarily any particular order, but I did try to put these first two here because there's something you should try to do as soon as you die, if possible. And the reason we're covering this video, I guess I should say now, is because when you were going for the rune, you very much could have died. So we need to start thinking about what we do when we die. Maybe you didn't die, that'd be great, but at some point, you probably will die. Now, some of these considerations are only for certain parts of the game. So, for example, this very first point, asking your carry if they need items from base, that is something you should do when you die in the laning stage, and you're very likely to just go back to the lane, because the level 1 courier takes about 30 to 40 seconds to go from the fountain to the tier 1 safe lane tower. That's quite a long time. Now, especially if you're going to respawn soon and then just teleport back to lane, it's a 3-second channel time to teleport from fountain to the tower, so you can get them their items a lot faster, which maybe doesn't make a huge difference, but other times it can be very useful to have, a bit more damage or a bit more armor, whatever they happen to buy. So if you do die for the bounty rune fight, oftentimes there's not necessarily anything you have to bring, because most people have spent a lot of their gold and they're not going to have something to bring right away. A good way to do this, even without asking them, you just click them, see how much gold they have, and if they have anything in their quick bar. Now, if you see they have the money to buy something, then you might say, hey, do you want me to bring you anything from base? And the reason we want to ask this as soon as we die is because it can be a bit of a hassle to do. You're trying to move around, you're trying to last hit, and now you have to buy an item and, right click, drop in base. It's a bit of a micro hassle for a lot of players who aren't used to it. Even if you do practice it, it is something that you have to do. So it's going to take away your focus from last hitting. And so we want to ask as soon as we die, assuming there's not a whole bunch of stuff going on, because obviously they're preoccupied. But as soon as there's time, ask them, do you want anything from base? So they have a bit of time to, when they get a chance, drop what they need. Sometimes they won't, and that's fine. Now, the next thing here is something you're not going to have to worry about if you're dying, for example, at this bounty rune fight at the 0-minute mark, or even in the early laning stage. Neutral items don't even start dropping till 7 minutes, and you probably won't even have any backpack items for a very long time. But the reason we want to do this is because it matters as soon as possible. Well, that's a better way to say that. Really, the neutral item I'm talking about is the Philosopher's Stone. You get passive gold, so if your team has it and no one is using it and you're dead, you should just put it in your neutral slot, because you will get gold while you're dead. So it's obviously better to do this when you're dead. Say you die and you're dead for 50 seconds. It's better to do that at the start, because now you'll have 50 seconds of extra gold, rather than remembering it halfway through and being like, oh yeah, I could do this. It's not game-changing, you're probably only gonna get 50 gold, but sometimes that 50 gold is game-changing, so it is something to consider to try to do soon. You could also consider what other neutral items your team has. The shovel is really the one I'm thinking of, where when you die and you respawn, if the shovel's just sitting in your team's neutral stash, you should take it out, dig something up, and then put it back. Because you might get a free teleport scroll, that's 90 gold. You might get a bounty rune for your team, that would be great. A salve, that's always fun to carry around. The kobold is kind of whatever. Now, I do think you should probably be just holding that shovel throughout the game and not just keeping it in the stash. Supports often have the extra backpack slots to do that and just swap it out whenever they need it. And that kind of leads to the backpack cooldowns, where whatever's in your backpack has double the cooldown than you usually would. So if you used a BKB and then put it in your backpack, it would double the amount of time before BKB is off cooldown. And so if you did that for whatever reason, you would want to make sure you swap BKB back into your backpack while you're dead, so that it has its regular cooldown. And this applies for whatever items you might have. So the shovel is something the supports might deal with a lot, where instead of getting to use it every roughly 2 minutes when you switch it into your backpack and only take it out when you need it, if you're dead, go ahead and put it in your active slot, because it will now be usable in about a minute instead of 2 minutes. And again, this isn't something support players usually have to deal with. We don't really fill up our item slots so excessively so, but it could be something to consider. Next, we get into some stuff that does apply throughout all the game, where you want to switch into this information gathering and decision making mindset, where really when you're dead, it's kind of like being a spectator in the game. If you just go to the watch tab, for example, and you wanted to click around in free camera, when you're dead, it's very much like that, where you can now check your teammates' items, your enemies' items. You can look around, try to see, oh, hey, this enemy support has a ward. You want to be looking for information, because remember when you were playing the game, it's kind of hard to do that when you're like trying to think like, I gotta pull, I gotta go harass this guy, maybe I need to gank, what time is it? There's a lot going on, and it is hard to keep up with checking items. So when you're dead, take a quick breather, recognize like, okay, I'm dead, what can I do? And then start checking for items. Now, many of these are not exclusive. So like I said, they weren't in any order. And when you're checking enemy items, or maybe even your teammates' items, you can be thinking about some of this other stuff, like, oh, what am I going to do when I respawn and stuff, which is our next point. We're going to start making some decisions. Are we going to TP to lane? Now, this is a big one for if you die in the early laning stage. So at the bounty rune, or any part of the laning stage after that. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you die at the bounty rune, you're probably just going to TP back to lane, because it is very important to play that first couple waves out, and you can't play them out if you're not there. So it's probably better to just TP back. Now, if you died really early, you may have time to just walk back, especially if you're a fast hero. So you can consider that. Just remember that the creeps are going to spawn at the 0-minute mark. So you can just look at where you are in the fountain, see what time it is, and see like, if I run to lane, will I be where the creeps spawn at 0 minutes? And if they are, then I can just keep running with those creeps, and I will make it to lane in time. If I'm a little behind, that's okay too. But if the creeps have already spawned and have started walking down lane, and then you respawn, you probably have to teleport to lane to get there in time. Now, after that first bounty rune fight, you are going to have to think a bit more about whether you should teleport to lane or not. And we're going to talk about that in the next video, actually. So keep it in mind that you are going to make that decision, but we're going to talk about actually making that decision in the next video, because it is kind of a difficult decision to make. Something else you could consider is to teleport mid to refill their bottle. I guess I'll put in a clip right here. How does bottle refilling work? You'll notice here, this fountain rejuvenation buff. This is what actually fills the bottle when you go into base. So this buff lasts 3 seconds when you leave the fountain, and it's gone. 30 seconds. So if you want to refill the mid, because it lasts 3 seconds, when you teleport, it will last 3 seconds once you complete your teleport. The mid can either hand you their bottle or drop it on the ground, and you just pick it up when you get there. I'm going to show it on the ground because it would be really hard to micro. Because remember, you only have 3 seconds to do this. You pick it up, it's going to get refilled, and then you'll still have a little bit more time. So you want to use the bottle on the hero once or twice, but then stop because you want to hand them a full bottle when it's done. If you don't know how to use a bottle, press and hold Control, and then press whatever hotkey you put the bottle in, and use that on the enemy hero, or your mid hero. The other thing worth noting, usual support inventory here, make sure you have an open slot. If you pick up a bottle and it goes to your backpack, it will not refill even with this buff. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to teleport, press Control, whatever the button, and we're just going to spam it on her once or twice, use the item, and then pass it back. So clear up our slot. Pick up our bottle. I was able to use it. Oh, see, I tried to use it twice, and it didn't work. So I would just use it once to be safe. Let's try it again. TP in. Oh, drop this bottle. We're going to TP in. Clear up her slot. Pick it up. Use it on her. Then pass it to her. You'll notice it doesn't refill right away. That's why you can usually only get off 1 refill, because there's also a cooldown on how frequently you can use the bottle. I would just go with 1 to be safe. It's better to hand them a full bottle. And then also to note, you don't always have to TP mid to do this. Like, anywhere you teleport will work. So if you happen to be bottom and then the mid laner comes and ganks for you and you died in the middle of the gank or something, let's say you died right before the gank, then they come in, get the kill. You can tell them, hey, I'm going to TP into the bottom lane. I can refill your bottle if you want. Just keep that option in mind. It's not something that happens that often. And if you're at a lower level, you maybe don't even need to consider this, because the mid laners aren't always like aware that it's something you can do. And sometimes it's like really confusing to explain to them. It's like, look, just put your bottle on the ground. I'll pick it up. If they don't know what you're talking about, just be like, okay, never mind, move on. Because if you teleport mid and they don't let you refill their bottle, that was like half the reason you may have chosen to teleport mid, and now it becomes pointless. So ask before you do it. Say like, hey, do you want me to refill your bottle mid, or wherever? If they say yes, then go ahead. They know what they're doing. They know what you're trying to do. It should be okay. But if they're like, what are you talking about? Just be like, never mind. Okay. Continue on with your empty bottle, you fool. Just kidding. No flaming. Okay. Back to the original video. And I hope that clip explained how it worked if you didn't know. Now, you're not going to do this, like if you die at the bounty rune, for example, but you may do it in the laning stage. It's just something to think about. Again, I think I'll cover it more in the next video about whether it's worthwhile or not to do that. But you just want to run through these decisions like, okay, should I do this? Should I do this? You need to know what all your options are, so then you can decide which one you're going to pursue. Now, something useful is to check the time when you're dead. You may want to do this as soon as you die, so maybe this should have been higher up on the list. But I put it down here so that my camera didn't get blocked by this longer text. Haha. So it was in slightly particular order, but just not for the reason that you probably would have thought. You want to check the time so that you know where to go. Remember, we talked about all these timing things in the game. If you're going to respawn and outposts are about to come up, for example, you probably need to be ready to go to those. Whether that's teleporting to your own outpost to protect it, or teleporting to a tower to sprint at it. Bounty runes are another example. Do you need to get there? Or can you teleport to a lane and then run to go stack? That could all be useful information. Checking the time for Roshan later in the game. If that's been taken and you know what time it is, check the time. See like, oh, we have like 2 more minutes. All of this will factor into your decision making. Then you want to communicate useful information. Actually, I don't know if I was about to say, as I've said, I do think communicating via mic is generally better than typing because it's very easy to see what you've missed. Or it's very easy to miss what someone's typed or pinged because a lot goes by. Now, I know some people have reasons not to use mics, and if that's the case, that's fine, obviously. But if you can, I do recommend it. If you want to type, you're probably fine too. But the issue is when you're typing, you're not playing. It's just not possible to like do both very effectively unless you only type very short words. So communicating information is very good. So say you get killed by the Queen of Pain rotating bottom and she uses her ult on you. It sucks that you died, but it's 125 seconds on her ult. So you can tell your team, she just used her ultimate on me. We're relatively safe for about 2 minutes from, a serious Queen of Pain gank. She still might do it, but it's just not going to be as strong as if she had her ultimate. And knowing what ultimates are in the game, at lower levels, that may not come into consideration as much, but the higher you go, people will recognize it, where it's like, I was scared to push this lane because, Enigma could have blink black holed me, but my position 5 just told me he got black holed, so now I know I'm safe for a little bit, and I can make these pushes. It's a little more okay to group up together because this AoE disable is down. Getting that useful information is out there. Getting that useful information out there is useful. Now, the next part, directing your team, this is a little game-to-game dependent, where, if you have a very, we'll say, aggressive team that is not so friendly to communicate with, maybe you don't want to push the buttons of trying to tell them what to do. That's totally acceptable. But if you have a team that is a bit more communicative and a bit more open, when a team fight is breaking out, for example, and you get killed, team fights can be very hectic. A lot can be going on all over the place. So it can help to have an outside voice tell you, hey, their carry is low, help out our axe, go kill this anti-mage really quickly. That can help direct people in their focus instead of seeing like, oh, I'm chasing this Mirana, I want to kill her. But really, you want a Mirana kill or do you want an anti-mage kill? The anti-mage kill is like way more important. But it's hard to see that when you're playing the game sometimes and you just see a low Mirana and maybe you don't see the anti-mage. Maybe he's off screen somewhere. So being that outside voice, that spectator, and telling people, hey, look for this guy, or watch out, this guy's coming in from this direction, that can be very helpful to have. Now, if other people are talking, you don't want to override people's hearing with like too many people talking, then that can get confusing. So if someone's already doing it, then yeah, just sit back a little bit, collect some information. That's okay. You don't have to do this when like you die in the lane. It's like 2v2 heroes, right? You think your carry is confused. It's like, I see one hero, I see the other hero. Maybe you do, but oftentimes they'll know. It's like, oh, I see this low bounty hunter, I will try to kill him and not the full health, other guy. So, do be aware of that. Don't micromanage your team to the point where it's annoying, but these like overall commands can be helpful. And said it in a nice way. I don't that goes without saying, but at the same time it probably should be said. Don't like, what are you doing? Go here. That's no good. That tilts people really badly. Just be like, hey, hit the buildings. Like, don't worry about this guy dying up here. Just focus the racks, and then we win, like this trade. Just these overall commands that aren't tilting. It's very important not to tilt your team in pubs. It's kind of sad that has to be said, but it does have to be said. Finally, buyback considerations. That's the last thing you should think about when you're dead. Or not necessarily the last, but it might even be the first thing you have to consider. But it's the last thing we're going to talk about. Because we're not going to talk about it right now. It's going to be in another video in the future. Because in the first 10 minutes of the game, it's pretty rare to need to buy back. And that's what a lot of this video series is focused on, is the first 10 minutes. Sometimes, I would say towards the end of those 10 minutes, it could come up into play. Because the hard support's buyback is quite cheap, if a large team fight breaks out, it can be worth it to buy back, so long as you have a teleport. If you don't have a teleport, don't even think about it, because what are you going to do? Buy back and then we'll walk 40 seconds to the fight? It's over. You have to have teleport to be able to rejoin the team fight. And if you can make a significant impact to that team fight, then it might be worth it, because your buyback is like 300, 400 gold sometimes. And if you secure 3 kills that otherwise would have been your team wiping, like that is a huge swing. We'll talk about this more in the future because, again, it doesn't happen very often in the first 10 minutes. And in fact, if a hard support bought back in the first 10 minutes, I would just assume that guy is tilted and ready to lose the game, because that is probably a rage buyback. There's like very few cases where buying back in that early of the game would have a beneficial effect for your team. So we'll talk about that in the future. But if you are at the point where I wanted to mention it now because this is something you think about when you're dead. Like, as soon as you die, and even before you die, you should be thinking, am I going to buy back and come into this fight? Because that's a decision you have to make pretty quickly. So if a fight is breaking out, you have to know that, like, if I get killed right here, I am buying back and coming back in. It's one of your death considerations already. And as soon as you die, you should be continuing to watch the fight to decide, can I make an impact if I buy back? And it's something you have to decide, like, in those first couple seconds. Because the longer the fight goes on and that you've been dead, then like the less chance to have impact there is. And that's kind of it, honestly. I think this might be a really short video because it's not easy to show these examples. Maybe I'll just cut in like clips of me being dead and you can see me just being dead looking around. But that's kind of it. I just want people, really what I want you to get out of this video is to know that there's stuff to do when you're dead. Not just, I want to pick a new song on Spotify, or you'll notice, surprisingly so, that flame your teammates incredibly harshly or spend a lot of time typing. It's not on this list because those are not very productive. Now, if you're typing useful information, that could fall under communicate useful information. Telling your teammates they suck, though, not useful. Doesn't help you. You should go collect information for your team and let them know, hey, this guy's almost done with his Battle Fury. Or, hey, this guy just finished his Diffusal, be very careful. Or, hey, I just saw them use Mirana ult. Look for the supports, see how many wards they have. Get useful information. Telling your team to do better, not very useful. Yeah, I think that's the end of the video. Thanks. It's pretty short, right? Probably still like 30, 20 minutes. That's short for me because I cannot stop talking like I am now. Okay, goodbye.